How climate change perpetuates racial injustice. Climate change exacerbates racial disparities. Can taking action on climate change help address long-standing injustices? When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005, the black neighborhoods of the city faced the worst of the disaster. 12 years later, the black districts of Houston were similarly impacted by Hurricane Harvey. In both instances, these communities were already struggling before natural disasters compounded their issues. Climate change and racism are two of the most critical challenges of the 21st century, and they are deeply interconnected. There is a clear division between those who have contributed to climate change and those who bear its consequences. People of color in the global South will be most affected by the climate crisis, despite having low carbon footprints. This racial divide also exists within countries due to long-standing structural inequities created by unequal power dynamics. Some may find it unsettling to discuss racism in the context of climate change. Climate change is commonly seen as an environmental problem that affects all of humanity, and thus, it may seem challenging to associate it with racism. However, historical and ongoing injustices have disproportionately exposed Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities to more significant environmental health risks than white communities, Veronica Mulna. But racism has many dimensions. The most visible form is interpersonal racism, which can manifest in offensive graffiti, online abuse, or racial slurs at sports events. However, racism goes beyond overt hate speech and actions. It also involves prejudice and stereotypes. Unfortunately, discussions about racism often stop at this surface level, where people can be categorized as either racist or not racist. With this simplistic perspective, as long as one ensures no active participation in racism, one may be content. However, racism runs deeper from institutional biases where people of color receive inferior services and care. Identifying institutional racism is not as simple as pinpointing specific events or individuals. It lies within the systems and processes, often referred to as racism without racists. You may also like the imperative for global climate justice, who bears the cost of climate change damages. The surge in climate change lawsuits, the term institutional racism, was first coined by civil rights activists Charles Hamilton and Kwame Ture in the 1960s, illustrating their point through housing discrimination. They highlighted that if a black family moving into a white neighborhood experienced racism and abuse, it may be condemned by the community. But racism becomes invisible when the black family is prevented from moving to that neighborhood in the first place. When denied mortgages or excluded from access to desirable areas by real estate agents, structural racism operates silently within the housing sector. White communities may assure themselves that racism does not exist, despite the black family experiencing discrimination. This structural form of racism operates without overt intent. Similarly, this is true for climate change. There is no hidden committee conspiring to cause climate disasters in the global South. However, people of color still face disadvantages and unequal outcomes, which can be seen through the statistics. Zambia serves as a clear example of climate change injustice. Despite having very low carbon footprints, the country remains severely impacted.